Hey everybody, I'm Ross Johnson from the Sound of Tomorrow show. You're listening to WAYO 104.3 FM Rochester. Brr, brr, brr. Coming up next, we've got a vaccine update for you vaccine fanatics who are so excited about vaccine news. We've got information, some news you can use about dog tears. And we're going to talk about going back to school. That's next on the Sound of Tomorrow. But first,
Oh my gosh, I love back to school season.
I can. We're just gonna take a moment. Hold on.
They just Oh my gosh, I love back to school season.
I can see that. Kids are back in school. The coming of fall with the nip in the air and the changing leaves.
What? Fall? No, gross. Fall? Are you kidding me? Yuck. Puke.
Sorry.
Fall leaves more like fall leaves me nauseous.
Okay, I'm sorry once again if I've offended you.
Autumn? More like dumb.
Okay, I got it.
Harvest season? More like the worst reason.
Okay, I think you're definitely done.
I think so too. No, see, I love back to school season because it means the frat boys will be back in town.
Okay, since when are you into frat boys? And I mean, okay, so, just like age wise, I mean, I'm not to judge. It's just that, it like ages and all.
Oh, Ross, you simply don't understand. I'm not shy about my age, and they don't seem to mind at all.
Well, okay, good for you, girl, I guess. I don't know, get it, girl. But I just didn't know you had that particular preference.
Call it what you like. I just love seeing those college boys all sweaty. When they roll up with those sleeveless shirts and cut off shorts.
Okay, ew.
Don't ew me. I don't see you out there trimming my hedges.
Ew!
Or painting my garage.
Ew? Okay, I'm not even sure what that's a euphemism for, but it sounds pretty dirty.
Ooh, and that reminds me, power washing my porch.
Okay, that is just sounds extremely personal. I don't know. Wait, okay, wait. Okay, these aren't euphemisms, are they?
Euphemisms? For what? No, see, the frat boys will work for nothing. It's so great. I just have to outbid all the other old ladies in the neighborhood, which is not hard since mostly they pay in hard candy and loose nickels, and I'm set for spring chores.
Okay, so this isn't some kind of May December sex thing.
Not unless you count getting a football player to rub your bunions while you watch other people work, a sex thing.
I mean,
it is pretty hot.
It sounds really hot. It sounds so hot.
So hot. And my
like
feet,
you just,
those strong
like you just
young
sit
hands.
There and you got like
glorious.
A drink.
Yeah, they'll make me a new drink.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
You're the smart one.
Can't wait. Frat boys.
Hey everybody, I'm Ross Johnson, your favorite co-host.
And I'm Heather Tchaikovsky, the babe with the power. Welcome back to the Sound of Tomorrow on WAYO LP Rochester.
It's a show in your ears.
Sure is.
Yeah.
Once again, we're only saying true things.
True things.
Yeah.
We're not literally in your ears, so I'm lying a little bit.
But the show is.
The show is.
If you're listening right now, the show is. We didn't say that we were. We wouldn't fit, probably. Not right in most people's ears.
Right in your ear holes.
That's where it goes.
We are.
That's where the show goes.
Heather, what's
How
up
are you, Ross?
with you? I'm, whatever. I'm over it. All of it.
Pretty much.
I'm done. It's it's been I was gonna say it's been you know what? It has been a nice it's been a nice hot summer around here, so I guess that's good. It's been a lot of The weather has been a bit extreme in other areas,
Yes.
so I feel bad sort of, feeling good about the hot weather. And I guess it's
Mhm.
been a little extreme even for some people around here who don't like it hot, but
Right. It's true.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yep, I'm absolutely content with it. I've got to say how the days are getting a little bit shorter now. I don't enjoy it.
I agree.
I'm not looking forward to fall.
I agree. You
I
know what
like
I
it
do?
when it's light till 9 o'clock.
I like it, I like it when it's light till 9 o'clock. I do appreciate the being a little darker a little later in the morning, because I'm sort of up with the sun type of person. Even, we
Oh,
blackout curtains and blah blah blah, but I'm very much like the sun comes up and I'm roughly awake, so I don't mind it being a little darker in the morning, but I
yeah.
like it being darker in the evening. So I'm really impossible to satisfy, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's tough. And I don't like,
As any of my lovers will tell you.
right, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's right now somewhat rainy here in Rochester. And usually I love the rain, but even that today I'm like, no. It's a harbinger of fall.
Yeah.
I don't want it.
Well, we needed it. I don't know. People say that. I don't know what that means.
We do need it.
Yeah. Heather,
Ross,
you like getting shots.
I love getting shots.
So we had talked a few weeks back. We've talked many times,
Many times.
many times about vaccines, and the so there's an update on vaccines, on the specifically the COVID vaccines, and I thought I'd run it by us. I think this is sort of what we had talked about a few weeks ago and sort of speculated on, but it's a little more concrete now.
Is it
So
related to the developing a different kind of vaccine? Like it's bivalent or something?
yes, yep,
Okay.
yep,
Yeah,
yeah.
because
Thank
we
you
did
for
talk about that. I think it was just last week.
yeah. Go ahead and step on my story there. Why don't you? Um, So, but this is per Monday, the August 22nd. Um, uh, the drug makers Pfizer and BioNTech announced officially that they are asking the Food and Drug Administration to authorize their updated version of the COVID-19 vaccine, and this is going to be specifically to target the Omicron subvariants that are currently dominant in the U.S. More than 90% of cases are caused by these subvariants now, so that is going to be a good thing. It's sort of taken off this summer. The vaccines currently being used were designed for the original coronavirus strain. I don't know, so it has some effectiveness against the subvariants, but it's not as good. So the new booster would have, sort of the original version mixed with the version that would fight the new subvariants. They expect
Mm,
that to be available within a couple weeks. If it's approved by the FDA, which they expect it to be, but it hasn't been
right.
officially. They've asked for approval. It hasn't been officially approved. They expect that to be available by sometime early September, something like that. The recommendation still seems to be that just like if you're due for a booster, go ahead and get the booster. Are if you haven't had any COVID-19 vaccine and you're waiting around for this bivalent booster, you still have to get the initial series.
Oh,
So
all right. Oh, that's
so
interesting.
yeah, so do that. You can't just you can't just skip ahead to the booster. You have to get the original series. So you still have to do that. If you've had your original series of 2 shots at least,
Mm-hmm.
you can do this. The recommendation is still like, just go ahead and do it. Probably don't, they're not recommending that people wait around for the new version, particularly if you're in a higher risk group or if you're over 50 or whatever. They're saying just go ahead and do it, and a couple months down the line, you you know once you're eligible for another booster, you could
Mm-hmm.
get the new one. I for me, I had mentioned that I have not had the most recent booster yet, just because
Yeah.
I've lazy and haven't gotten around to it. So I probably
Same.
am gonna wait a couple weeks now because I've waited this long. So, and I'm not in a particularly high risk group, so I probably am. The danger there is, the FDA still has to approve it. if there is, they don't expect there to be any restrictions, but if there's any manufacturing slowdown, or if there's a limitation, they might wind up having to limit it to, people in higher risk groups. So
Mm-hmm.
keep that in mind. So if you're planning to wait, those are some considerations. The recommendation does not seem to be to wait, just because, I mean, who wants to tell you to wait? I mean, it's sort of I think it's sort of if you feel like you're at risk, go ahead and get the shot, and don't wait around for a probably but still hypothetical shot, a few weeks down the line. I guess the going thinking is that this may well just wind up being a new flu shot. There's like
Right.
an annual update that would have whatever the most current versions are. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been kind of, I guess, almost a hope of mine,
mm-hmm.
is that we'll just go in every year and we'll get our flu shot. Maybe they'll even start comboing like a flu COVID booster, and you'll
I
just get
know.
it.
I know. I'd love that. I don't know if they can. I don't know how that works. Like,
I
I don't
don't
know if
know
you can just
either. Like,
mix them all
mix
in
them
one
in the same
syringe, but
syringe, right?
right.
Yeah, I don't really know, but my plan is still to wait a little bit. It's
Yeah.
too early for me to get my flu shot, but I figured I'd get them both on the same day so that then my arm will only hurt once,
Yeah.
which I think I said last week as well. But so I'm going to wait because, again, like you, I've been lazy on getting my second booster.
Yeah.
I guess I got the first one. I was like, woo, I'm boosted.
And I'm still not sexy enough for a monkeypox shot, so I'm gonna
Sorry.
waiting on that. Even with all my I've been wearing, even wearing my skankiest attire.
Yeah, your most
So
revealing outfits.
yeah, they're still not giving it
No,
to
they're
me. So
withholding it.
they are.
What a shame.
I'm too butch.
Oh, poor Ross.
Yeah, they're like, you are clearly a straight man trying to come in here and get your monkeypox shot.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, I'm not. And they're like, no, you're too manly. You're far
I'm
too
sure that's
masculine.
I'm sure that's why they're turning people away.
Right.
Are they turning people away? Do you know? Have you read anything about this?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I think it's like the COVID shots initially. Um there were restrictions for groups. I don't know how, like with the initial COVID shots as well. I don't know how sticky they're being about that. Because I
Right.
know, with the initial COVID shots, there were all these restrictions about who could go, but then anecdotally, pretty much everybody I knew who just showed up for one they were sort of like, go ahead and get one. Why not?
That's what I heard too. A lot of people would just roll on up and nobody stopped them. I have heard of one person who weirdly enough got like flagged
Oh,
and hassled about it.
huh.
And it was really weird because it was a similar situation to what I had because my appointment was right after they dropped the age restriction
Okay.
so that it was fine for me to go. And same for that person. And so, like, security came over and they're checking ID and checking the registration forms and everything. It seemed very, very weird.
Huh.
And then the person who was being delayed, reminded them the age restriction has changed. Like, I am here. I'm qualified to get this shot. Can I go get my shot now?
Wow.
But it
Well,
was weird.
and I'm sure it's one of those things too where, like, you're new at the vaccine clinic. They tell you what the rules are. Maybe you didn't get the update. I can see someone being I can see someone like, these are the rules. I am being a stickler for the rules, and I did not get the update because I
Yeah.
started this job. So I can see. I mean, I try not to get too huffy
No,
about people like enforcing the rules that they were told to enforce.
yeah, it was just strange because, like you said, all the people that we know who just decided, like, you know what? I'm not quite on the list, but I really, really want this vaccine. And they showed up. Everybody was like, we'd love to give you a shot.
Right.
Let's get you started on this. So it was surprising that I do know of one person who got a, like, hey, what are you doing here? You're not supposed
Yeah.
to be here to get your health care to protect yourself and others.
Well, and healthcare providers were probably a little surprised, and the vaccine manufacturers were probably a little surprised by the degree of vaccine hesitancy, which I'm sure opened up extra shots for people who wanted it because, I think they expected, like, we've got this
Yes.
deadly disease that's killing millions of people worldwide. Of course, everyone's going to want to run and get this vaccine. And then so
Yeah.
many people were like, I'm not getting that vaccine.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
suddenly, you know, suddenly
In
I guess,
fact, I was
that
talking
that
with
probably opened up opportunities for people like you and me who were like, I will absolutely get the vaccine. Yes.
I was talking with a younger friend who lives in another state, and she's in her 20s, as is her partner. They were able to get their shots super early because they had a friend who worked at a clinic
Hmm.
who called them up one day and said, "We have all these doses that are going to go to waste. People don't
Wow.
want them. Come and get them."
Yeah.
And so even though they're in their 20s, they ran down there as fast as they could and they got their
Right.
COVID shots, but only because they had the insider information from their friend.
Well, if anybody's got some insider information on the monkeypox shot, let me. I really
Why
and like
don't you
I'm.
call your doctor and just get one?
You know what? I don't care because I truly like as much as I'm very like give me all the vaccines. I want the vaccines.
I
I'm
know.
vaccine greedy.
Yes, me too.
I'm not in an area. I'm not in a life. Like I'm in my danger from monkeypox at this present time
Yes.
is pretty close to zero as you can get. So it's
Uh-huh.
really like not as much as I'm vaccine greedy and I want all the vaccines, please give me all the vaccines. I want to collect them
Yeah,
all.
me
Um,
too.
I really have no great need for it, and I'd feel sort of jerky, like like look, I have like I've had a single sex partner for decades, and I live in a not I live in an area where this is not prevalent in the least. Please take this from someone who needs it and give it to me.
I know.
Yeah,
But I have a feeling, like, I remember when we first started seeing the news stories about monkeypox, there was something about the US having a very large store of vaccines already on hand.
yeah,
So maybe, unlike when the COVID shots first became available and we thought there was some kind of limited supply and they should be doled out in a certain way, before we knew, as you said, that a lot of the American people would say, "What? Healthcare? No!
right.
How dare you?" But I think there's lots of monkeypox vaccines around.
All right. Well, I'll keep it in mind.
Yeah, you could just get one.
Yeah, it's fine.
It'd be some good stuff.
I want all the
So, Ross,
vaccines. Yep.
speaking of vaccines, I bet there are a lot of young people out there who are getting all of the vaccines because it's time for back to school.
Back to school.
And
That's
they've
quite a
got to get
segue.
it. Wasn't it? That was pretty good, right?
I love that.
So, even though we are not parents of human children ourselves,
Correct. We're
I
going to tell you. We're going to tell you how to handle back to school.
well, it's interesting because there was an article on NPR called "Keep an Eye on Your Students' Mental Health This Back to School Season."
Yeah.
And I feel like, and we're of a similar enough age. I don't know if you'll agree with me or not. I feel like nobody really paid a ton of attention to the mental health of children when we were children.
Oh, not at all. No.
So I
No, if
always,
anything it was like make sure your children cry at least once a day or you're being a bad parent.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
talking with my younger friend about anxiety, and, you know, I'm a good several decades older than she is. And she was talking about how her symptoms were treated while she was growing up. And I was like, oh, you know what we did back when I was a kid? You yelled at the kid.
Yeah. You
That
might spank them.
you might. So every time I see one of these, I'm glad that my knee jerk reaction isn't something like, oh, kids don't need that.
Right. Right.
It's almost more a bit of a wistful, like, wouldn't that have been nice
Wouldn't that have been great?
if
Yeah.
somebody were writing these articles?
When I had a
So,
mental health crisis as a child, somebody put out a cigarette on me. I mean, that was
yes.
like that was the thing. And that was recommended. I mean, that was like Mr. Rogers told you to do that.
I mean, or at least your pediatrician told your parents.
Right.
Just yell at them. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But so apparently there have been a lot more stresses on kids with the pandemic and whatnot, and the homeschooling and the lack of schooling and the lack of socialization.
Certainly unique pressures, yeah.
Yeah, and things that you and I haven't faced. And it says that the pandemic has caused widespread disruption to learning, but there's also a big concern about students of all ages and how it's affected their mental health. A lot of teenagers have reported feeling sad and hopeless, and the Biden administration has tried to make student mental health a priority. And so there's 5 suggestions for parents, or I would assume people who might know a teen, people who might hang out with a teen.
Yeah, I guess
Because,
anybody who's in a position to benefit someone else's mental health is, that's
yeah, because if you had a niece or nephew
sure.
that you hung out with, something like that, I don't know. I don't know any teens.
Right.
But the first suggestion is be proactive. And a lot of the anxiety for kids, says one of the experts cited in this article, is that it's from it's fear of the unknown. So there's a lot of anxiety around back to school. There's a lot of anxiety around maybe being the new kid, the perhaps going to a different classroom setup. I
Yeah.
remember being very anxious when I was a kid about now we're going to get up and change classes,
Ugh.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's the suggestion that if there's a new school, for example, go on over there, take a walk around the school grounds. Or if you can't go to the school, look at it on Google Maps just so that it's a little better known.
Yeah.
And they also say that if students are nervous about the classroom, getting them into athletics and arts programs can help.
I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah, because
Some kind
sometimes
of extracurricular to give you more connections, I guess.
more connections and also kind of have a project to do.
Right.
Because if you're doing a team sport or an athletic pursuit or you're making art, that can sometimes be less rigid than a typical classroom setting.
Yeah.
So the second suggestion is to ask about the good and the bad, and don't just ask about the good things. Also be sure to say hey, what isn't going so great for you, so that you understand what challenges your kid might be facing.
Yeah.
But that's where Nathan Demers, who's a clinical psychologist in Denver and helps run You at College, which is an app designed to connect students with mental health resources. He says that when you're talking to your student, ask them about what's going well, but also be very clear and ask what isn't going well. Don't shy away from the hard questions. Ask them about the challenges. And that is important because I can definitely see how it would be easy to just, oh, did you have a good day? And then maybe your kid is really having a lot of problems, but they're only answering the question that you asked
Yeah.
about their
Yeah.
good day.
Well, and that's so much of our interactions, we almost design our questions around not probing and not getting deep answers.
Mm-hmm.
So, you ask someone how their day went, oh, fine. Or, again, like you said, focus on the positive things. I think it makes a lot of sense to, especially if you're a parent or a healthcare provider or the loved one of a student who's, is potentially in a stressful situation, to sort of ask those more probing questions and dig a little bit deeper at least.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then there's a really good tip that I guess I hadn't thought about for myself, is that you might want to pay particular attention to how you phrase questions. Using what instead of why can remove any hint of accusation
Hmm.
and leaves room for the students to open up about their feelings and relieves the pressure some students feel to be having a good time. Because there's a big difference between what is it you find challenging about being in your class this year and why do you find it challenging.
Yeah.
One of them does come off like this is a you problem, and one is more like, what problems are you encountering?
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. Number 3, I think this is always a good thing to look out for, is keep an eye on changing behavior. And some of the common signs of mental health symptoms are things like changes in sleep, increased irritability, dramatic changes in size and
Hmm.
shape, changes in appetite, and it it can be hard to know because it says in this article that a lot of things happen naturally, especially when kids go away to college, for example, because suddenly they're setting their own routines, maybe they're choosing their own meal plans, things like that. but it's still good to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And the suggestion in the article is trust your gut. Parents know their kids better than anyone else, usually, and often they can sense when something isn't right. If there's a difference between, oh, my son or daughter is having a challenging day or a challenging week versus something just seems off.
Hmm.
And for younger students, one of the most common warning signs is irritability with school or teachers, which is interesting. I guess,
That's how I live my life.
right. I know. I
Irritable with
guess
various
irritable
things. Yeah.
child. I guess maybe I wasn't an irritable child.
Yeah.
I was withdrawn. I was anxious, but I learned to try to tamp that down and keep it tight inside so I wouldn't get yelled at.
Yeah.
But
Which is, which is, a strategy on the other side. If you're a student,
right.
definitely the thing to do is for your mental health is definitely tamp it down. You keep it deep
Yes.
inside.
Right.
Because otherwise somebody's going to put a cigarette out on you. So just,
Or
that's,
in my case, you're going to get yelled at,
you're going to
which
get yelled at. Yeah.
I still fear being yelled at.
Right.
The article does point out that it's not just COVID and the effects of the pandemic. Um, it might seem that way because there has been a real uptick in mental health issues. And that's definitely a contributing factor, but also mental health issues can simply arise.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
it's not, it's not as, it's certainly not the case that there were no mental health and, no mental health concerns before COVID. And who knows to what extent even COVID is exacerbating. It might just be that
mhm.
we're having the conversation because this is such a prominent issue. Um,
Yep,
are there more mental health issues than there were before? Maybe not even, but it's never a bad time to dive in and talk about them. And it's certainly uniquely, unique. It's a unique set of circumstances and a uniquely challenging time, I think.
absolutely. Sarah Lipson, an assistant professor of public health at Boston University, has a study in her department, and the results were that the number of college students experiencing mental health issues first spiked in the 2015 to 2016 school year
Hmm.
and has been going up ever since. Which, somewhere right around there is where a lot of spikes occurred for me as well.
True. I do wonder though, it's one of those things where I get a little
Yeah,
I get a little questioning when we talk about things that have just developed or I don't know to what extent
I agree with you.
these mental health issues are, spiking at any given time. And of
Right.
course there are world circumstances and life circumstances going on now, so I don't doubt that there are spikes in those sorts of anxieties and all sorts of things. But sometimes I think it's just, oh, we're actually talking about it and confronting it now, as
Yes.
opposed to ignoring it or pretending it doesn't exist, or
Yep.
just yelling at it and hoping it'll go away. So, uh, and my only point there is, sometimes we get sometimes I think people get the idea that like, oh, this is a tricky time, and then this will go. Maybe we can handle this, maybe we can't, but it'll go away. It's fine.
No.
And it doesn't go away. Again, there might be upticks there, or there might be uniquely challenging circumstances, but there's it's always there. I think everything you've suggested aren't just now things. I think they're always and
Right.
forever things, and it would be nice if they were always in the past things. But of course,
Right.
we can't change the past. So
That's the thing, because especially, again, I would say even when we were young people, we were maybe in high school or college, there would have been a lot more stigma in admitting that we were having some kind of mental health crisis or struggle.
yeah,
Uh, there, there was the weird cultural thing where that brought shame to the family
hmm,
somehow, and so you were supposed to just pretend that you didn't have anything going on. And that
right,
was another thing I loved. As much as I joke ruefully about talking with my friend who's a couple decades younger, her experience in facing all kinds of mental health related, you know, problems, issues, topics. She and her friends and her family, everyone's just so open about it. And it's
yeah,
just, hey, this is what's going on with me. And
yeah,
there's not the stigma in getting medication or anything like that. So I do think you're right. Like the reporting, Well, how many people just were going like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Well, and keep in mind too, I think this is very situational even today. I think that there is sort of an overall increase in awareness and discussion about it. But I think, we see in the news, we see a lot of sort of restigmatizing of from politicians and, depending on where you're located, we're seeing a lot of, restigmatizing, I think is the best word
Mm-hmm.
of trying to walk backwards on some of this. So I think overall the picture is better, but I think it's also very situational, where you live, where you're going to school,
Yep.
how open your family is, that sort of thing. So I think there are, even as we're talking about improvements, I think there are plenty of situations and individuals who still don't have that, as much support
Yep.
as there is
It's
now, which is
true.
still not enough. I think there are plenty of students and people of all ages who still don't have even that level of support.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, the point being, everything you're saying is good, and people should listen, and people should do it, and more.
Well, and the fifth point is that you can lend a hand. Parents can help by identifying the problem and offering solutions. And there are resources, and now with the internet, there are a lot of resources,
Yeah.
and they're much easier to find. In the article, it mentions that some in-person resources might include talking with the counselor at school or
Hmm.
finding an on-campus group like Active Minds, but there are virtual resources which are a very easy first step. There's that app You at Colleges,
Hmm.
where students can just give recommendations for nearby resources. And it says that in a crisis situation, the easiest option for families is to text home to 741 to connect via phone with a trained counselor.
I didn't know about that.
I didn't either. So that's some good concrete stuff right there that could actually be of an immediate help.
Yeah. Well, and I think the first step, for anyone for any parent or friend or anyone who is witnessing someone in a mental health crisis or who's having mental health issues, and who isn't, but I think the first step is to acknowledge, the all important first step, maybe half the battle, is to acknowledge and validate what's going on with that person. Because I think our our trouble and our issues in dealing with mental health issues is that we try to sweep it under the rug, or we ignore
Mm-hmm.
it, or you know we say it's fine because we encourage people to say it's fine and everything's fine, and we're not going to talk about it. So I'm sure if you're a parent, I'm sure it's overwhelming when you come across these, because it's not an easy, you can't go get a vaccine, you can't
Right.
go, there's no simple solution. So I mean, I think the first, what I would suggest for any parent, being not a parent myself, I'm full of helpful child raising advice, is to but having been a child who
Right.
might have appreciated this, is to acknowledge and validate and say, you know I see what's going on with you. I understand what's going on with you. I'm hearing you. I'm here to listen. I'm here to talk to you.
Yeah.
I'm here to acknowledge that your feelings and your struggles are real and valid, and they're
Mm.
not, they're not silly. They're not inconsequential. They're not unimportant. They are real. And I think
Yep.
that's I think that's, I don't know if it's half the battle, but it's like, if you can do at least that much, you're making a difference already.
Yep. And the other half of that is then you follow it up with, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yep. Yep. So these are, I guess what we're saying is there are two tracks here. You can
Right.
there's sort of a there's sort of a modern mental health way of approaching this, or there's an older, time tested and true way of dealing with these issues, which is, you just kind of yell at them until they go away. So
Right. Yep. And then I don't know, they maybe you'll end up with a kid who grows up to be like me. So I think let's say don't follow that one.
right, right, and I think, if you want your kid that if you want a kid that screams through the night, that's
Well, I mean, they're screaming, but I can't scream and grind my teeth at the same time.
Well, that's true. That's
So
true.
I have to take a break from the screaming on occasion.
Which anyone who's ever been near you in the evening appreciates.
It's true. So, Ross, when you go back to school,
Yeah.
you know what they have
What
sometimes,
what do they have
less and
sometimes?
less in schools? Books.
Books. Yeah.
I ran across something that I started finding very interesting, and I'm not even sure how I can sort out what I'm trying to say. It started by seeing an article, and I'd heard some coverage of this as well on NPR about the Bible is among dozens of books banned from this Texas school district.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just another article about this school district, Keller Independent School District outside Fort Worth, Texas, where there was some book banning. There were 40 titles under review. In the article, it said they had been removed. It outlined, some parents were worried about banning the books for everyone, and they understood that maybe some people would want their kids not reading these, but they shouldn't be removed entirely.
Yeah.
Which then led me to go over and have a look at some of the banned books or some of the under review books. And as of August 18th, when this article was released, there was another review either on that day or later in that day, because I saw some of the books that the article reported, for example, a graphic novel adaptation of Anne Frank's diary. And all the versions of the Bible, those had been re-reviewed and they were going to be kept in the library. But so I was really interested with that because they had the whole list, and then they just there's a review board and a very short synopsis of the determination. Re-reviewed, has been removed from the collection,
Mhm.
has been removed from classroom libraries, will remain in school library, things like that. And then it would just say the vaguest thing about who challenged the book and not much about why it was challenged, but it was mostly community member or parent, which then led me to the rules for this school district and their whole review and complaint process, which I found fascinating. So, do you want to know who can challenge a book or instructional resource in a school?
I hope it's me, but yeah.
You have to be in the district. A
Okay.
parent of a district student, any employee, or any district resident may formally challenge an instructional resource using the district's educational program on the basis of appropriateness. So
So
I think if this were to apply in Rochester, New York, which I didn't have time to check out, I, as a not parent, but I live in this city, could just start demanding that the schools ban stuff.
well, and I believe too. So this is what seems to be going on in a lot of these districts, and I believe it's the case. I mean, I sort of know the case you're talking about, so I'm not 100% sure this is the case, but this is a case in some of these districts where the and this is sort of a broad theme across the states that have started to put in these like challenge book rules, let's get books out of the libraries type of rules, is that there's a chilling effect to the point that either it's written into the law or it's just become a matter of fact that if a book is challenged, it's gone because nobody wants to deal with it. Like nobody wants to take a chance. And some of the penalties for exposing kids to these books or whatever
Mm-hmm.
are they're either legally harsh or they're we talked about even last week, the death threats to librarians, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So um the 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 purpose of these laws, whether they're challenged in court or not, or whether they're struck down in court, is to have this sort of chilling effect. So, and I believe in the case that you're talking about, there's sort of a preemptive, like once it's challenged, it's gone, and then we will look later to see if it can be brought back.
I
So,
believe that that's it. And I think that's why there's the discrepancy between the reports on the school website and
mhm,
what NPR reported. Because when NPR reported, there's a complaint about the Bible, and they
yeah,
went, no more Bible in the library.
right.
And then the committee went and took a look, and they were like, the Bible goes in library. That's
There's a Florida district where they had to refuse. I guess there's a group that provides dictionaries on a regular basis.
I read about this one. Yes, it's the Rotary Club.
Yeah, the Rotary Club provides dictionaries on a sort of annual basis or whatever. But because the any new, basically, it's an opt-in situation where any book in the curriculum, it's not a matter of books being challenged. Any book in the um, accessible by children has to be approved,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have the staff member. They haven't had the budget to hire the staff member that they legally need to hire to review the things to see if it can be part of the curriculum. So, since they don't have the staff member to approve the dictionary, they can't accept the donation of dictionary. So dictionaries are banned by, I mean, de facto, and this is where I think it's unintended consequences of these laws, but it's also very intended consequences of these laws
Mm-hmm.
of to be. And again, and not all these laws are going to stand once these laws start getting challenged in court. They're not all going to stand up. The details are not all going to stand up, but the impact is still going to be the same, which is going to be whatever the law is. People are starting to become afraid of books. They're starting to
Mm-hmm.
be afraid of having books in their library. They're starting to be afraid to have books in their classroom. They're starting to be afraid to teach books.
Right.
And that's the goal of all of these laws, is to make people afraid to teach books.
Mm-hmm.
And if some dictionaries, if some students don't have access to dictionaries, well, that's a necessary evil, just to make sure that they don't have books that we don't want them to have.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I found all this information on the school website also very interesting because they outline the entire process for who can challenge it, what's going to happen when it's challenged, can it be re-challenged if the person who challenged it isn't satisfied with what the board says. And they're very clear that the committee decides if a book is educationally suitable or pervasively vulgar by working through a series of questions in the areas of appropriateness, content, review/evaluations, and purpose. When the book is nonfiction, the committee also considers the authenticity of the book. And there is a committee checklist and everything, but there's a student's First Amendment's rights are implicated by the removal of books from the shelves of a school library. They write in their notes. A school district cannot remove materials from a library for the purpose of denying students access to ideas with which the district disagrees. And it does say a district may remove materials because they're pervasively vulgar or based solely upon the educational suitability of the books in question. So I liked that language. And even more than that, I both liked and was intrigued to see this because I'm sure there are some parents in good faith. Well, I can't imagine in good faith on some of these, but they are somehow afraid of books, and they're afraid that their children are going to be harmed by books. Or maybe they're just even in good faith totally bigoted people who do not want their kids to get educated on certain subjects.
Oh yeah, I think that's more likely, but yeah.
Um but I did not even realize there was this instructional PDF. It was brightly colored. It was very attractive. That says, I'd like to help my child make choices about what they're reading. What are my options? One is you can always ask to meet with your child's principal, teacher, or librarian to discuss your options. Two, you can ask your child's teacher to share the books being assigned for class. If you have concerns, you can ask that your child have an alternate assignment. Three, you can give the campus librarian a list of books you do not want your child to be able to check out. They're happy to help you. If and four, if you believe the book is inappropriate for all students, not just your child, you can formally challenge the book. So it turns out, this was news to me. If you are truly being a dedicated parent who simply wants to shield your child from, reading about African American history,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many things you can do before you go to this book has to be banned, which I guess somewhere in the back of my mind, I did have the idea like, maybe there's some people who just don't get that books are good, and they're afraid that books in general are going to hurt their kids. And that's why they're trying to get them banned.
Well, and I guess, I mean, again, I'm not a parent. It seems to me, it's one thing if you're talking about a movie. I mean, a movie is something you can absorb very quickly. I always feel like books are sort of self-limiting in the sense that it's probably going to take you a while to read a book. I mean, I'm a very quick reader, and it's still going to take me a long enough time to read a book that um, I'm going to expect that I'm going to have a certain level of development and ability to absorb ideas. I also feel like if my parents are paying any attention at all, um, you know, I mean, am I really sneaking off to read, Tropic of Cancer? I don't know. It's just I the being afraid of books for your kids is so foreign to me. That's just such a hard
Mm-hmm.
idea that I struggle with. And then again, to me, and again, I don't have any kids, but to not be a parent that would say, "Oh, I have concerns about," would not direct it to your child to say like, "I don't need this book taken out of the library. I don't need this book restricted from your access, but I do want to talk to you about it." Or can you talk to me about it? Can you tell me about this book
Yeah.
and what appeals to you? So that's foreign to me. I understand it's a little more, being a parent is sometimes more complicated than that. So I get it. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's easier said than done. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's that simple, but also you're so worried about your kid having access to a book, but not so worried that you want to spend time talking to your kid about what they're reading. Um, and then to take it to the next level of like, well, no one should have access to this book. And again, it's not,
Yeah.
it's not, it's and we've seen it's overwhelming. There's no good faith here because it's overwhelmingly, when you look at the books that people are banning, it's overwhelmingly, it's Black history, it's
Mm-hmm.
books with queer themes and queer characters. It's there's no good faith about, I could see a good faith argument of like, oh, I don't like books that glorify violence or whatever.
Right.
There are things that are okay. These are moral issues where, again, I think my response as a parent would be, I'm going to talk to my kid about this, rather than try to get the books burned on the lawn. But
Right.
just the idea that, again, the idea that it's so, when you look at the books that are being restricted,
Uh-huh.
it's so overwhelming what it is. And it's so not what
Yeah.
they say it is.
I
It
was
is
on I was trying to get on the logic train again, wasn't I?
You were trying to get on the logic train, and I try to get on the logic train too,
No, you're
and then
right.
you
You're
can't.
right.
You bounce right off because
There's not a good faith argument to this. Except like I could definitely see with the talking to the librarian. Like there are some books that I was probably when I was a kid too sensitive to read,
yeah,
and they would really 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 like upset me, and like to
right,
this day I remember the magnitude of how like sick to my stomach and like shaken, and I don't feel like that helped me
right.
at all. I don't, for example, Where the Red Fern Grows, no clue what the message of that book was. I just remember some very, very, very traumatic content, and all I remember is the trauma.
Mhm.
So maybe had someone, though this would have embarrassed me, but had my parents had the thought of, oh, Heather's a really sensitive kid, and that book is just going to make her sick and it's going to make her cry. We don't want her to read that.
Well, and I guess part of it too is, you can't save yourself from everything. And if you're a parent and
I
you know
know.
that this book is, that's just so hard to predict, I think, what that's going to be.
Yeah.
And also
Well,
these are a lot of the same parents who are going, who are going to tell you about snowflakes and why don't you cry, baby? They're not
mm-hmm.
interested in mental health. They're not interested in being sensitive to anyone else's kid. But suddenly, like, my kid is far too delicate to learn about Harriet Tubman or
Right.
Stonewall. So it's I don't know.
Yeah. Oh,
I get
yeah.
what you're saying. I mean, there's definitely stuff where,
No, I'm just talking about me personally
oh,
on that one.
totally. No, and I think that's not just you. I mean, but I think that's so hard to that's probably inevitable that you're gonna be
Mhm.
exposed to that a kid's gonna be exposed to something like that because that's so individual and so personal, and it requires a parent that knows the books and knows what
Right.
you're reading and understands your exact sensitivities, and sometimes you don't even know your own sensitivities until you run across them in a piece of
Mhm.
literature or in a movie, and you're like, "Oh, okay, that just messed me up a little bit."
Yep.
But it can be anything. I mean, it could be a book about spiders, I mean, it's so that's that's I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up Charlotte's Web and mess you up with that again, but
I know you need to ban those too. We need to you need to call the school library and get a list of things that I can't get out, except I don't go to the library because I'm bad.
right. I'll call
But I
ABE
did
Books
think
and tell them
I guess
here a list of books you can't buy.
my big takeaway with this is it's more deliberate and it's more overt than I even thought.
Yeah,
It didn't occur to me that there were all these other steps one could take if one really were like, I have a very carefully curated list of what my child can and cannot read.
right.
So I'm going to make sure they can't access XYZ books. I didn't get that you could give your school librarian a list and
Mhm.
say, my kid's not allowed to get these.
Yeah,
And so it was just even more eye opening. Like, oh, there's way more ways to keep a book out of your particular kid's hands.
right, as opposed to
So that
jumping to
means,
nobody can have
yeah,
them.
yeah, when you go straight to like, we've got to ban this from the school and remove it from the library, it's like, oh, you really mean that? Like, I get it. Like, you're not trying to protect anyone.
Heather, you know what I'm never gonna ban?
What are you never going to ban?
Dogs.
Never ban dogs.
Real quick before we wrap up, just
I know. I want to hear
was
about
just
it.
this was an interesting little piece. So there's a new research out of Japan, and this was reported in. I saw this in CNN, the New York Times, the Guardian, so a bunch of news sources. If you're interested in this, but new Japanese scientists suggest that dogs' eyes may well up with tears with happiness when reunited with their owner after a period of absence. So
Aww.
this is from Takafumi Kikusui. I'm mispronouncing that terribly, and I apologize. A professor at the Laboratory of Human Animal Interaction and Reciprocity at Azabu University in Japan. They've been investigating dog tears. He had noticed that one or two of his standard poodles would her eyes would well up when she was interacting with her puppies. So I guess we've known
Aww.
that, and by we, I mean science has known that dogs do. We don't think of dogs as crying, but they do have tears that sort of keep their eyes clean and healthy, the same way that tears in our eyes also serve that purpose. What science had not understood was and not known was that those tears, like in humans, could also be associated with emotion. So
Aww.
there was and I'll because we're running low on time, I'll save all the research that they did to come to this conclusion. But this new study suggests that what they found was that when in studying dogs that had been away from their humans for some period of time, they would find that the eyes would well up with tears upon reuniting, and they think this has to do with oxytocin, the same hormone that humans that we call the love hormone or the maternal hormone, which can stimulate sort of tears of joy, positive
Aww.
tears. So this is going to be published in the journal Current Biology coming up. If anyone wants to get a lot more detail about it, or you can look at various news stories to see about the research. But it was interesting because I've sort of never noticed that. I sort of thought, and I guess people have thought that dogs don't cry. I assume they had moisture in their eyes that would
Yeah.
sort of flush out things like we did. But there's this new study suggests that in fact dogs do have tears at least associated with positive emotions. Maybe not tears associated with sort of sad emotions like we have, but the sort of tears of joy that we get, like you might cry when
Aww.
reuniting with a family member or a loved one after a long period of time. That seems to be a thing that dogs do as well, and it's very sweet because dogs are nice and everybody
Wow.
likes doggies.
Have you ever seen that when you've come back from, say, a vacation and the dogs have been at their care facility and then you go to pick them
No,
up? Do they seem to tear up?
no, and I don't know. I don't know if it's I don't know how noticeable it is. I mean, because it's always like you're noticing the like, oh, you're jumping up and down on me and licking my face. So I'm not
Yeah.
looking at their eyes, and I don't know.
Yep.
I feel like it's not a assuming this is this research is valid and good. I feel like it's probably not the fact that we haven't noticed that humans have not noticed this a lot
Mm-hmm.
before makes me feel like it's not a ton. Like it's not a it's not tears streaming down the face kind of
Yes.
thing like humans might do. So, but I will, it's something I will keep an eye out for. But I'm
Yeah.
also, again, at the time this would be happening, usually, at least with my in my family, like I'm being jumped on and knocked over and licked
Right.
on the face and all that. So
Yeah,
it's a
because
little
they're so
hard to
excited.
it's a little hard to be like, let me look in your eyes.
Aw.
Yeah.
Wow, that's sweet. I think cats have tears, like you said, to they get a piece of dust in their eye and the tears
Hmm.
help, but I don't think cats cry.
Yeah, they might cry a little bit when you don't leave them alone, or you know, but
I think that my
or when
Nigel tends to
breakfast is
cry
late.
more when I do leave him alone.
Right. Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, nothing about cats, but we'll stay tuned for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of staying tuned, stay
Good
tuned.
segue.
There's more coming up on WAYO 104.3 FM, Rochester, and of course, more of us next week. But in the meantime, there's a whole week's worth of stuff, so stick around. Don't go anywhere. It's fun. Stay here. Where else you got to be? Nowhere. This is where you want to be. It's a good place. So you just what? So how does this work? So you just like wander around the frat house looking for guys to do work for you?
It helps to get yourself invited to a party.
I didn't even get invited to frat parties when I was in college and in a frat.
Oh, sweetie. You know how I always say you look good in sleeveless shirts? You should try that.
I will not sexually objectify myself just to get young men to come and do my chores.
Uh, Sexually objectify? Oh, MGP, no. I just meant that they'd see those pale, scrawny little arms of yours and they'd take pity on you. You need to look like you just couldn't even pick up a twig. Oh, there! Perfect! Just like that.
Okay, I'm not doing anything.
Well, keep it up.
Ugh.